Dimensioning is a topic that I've broken down into several parts so we can see the PowerPoint slideshow with a video narration. So please be patient and we'll break it down into some bite-sized chunks. The purpose of the dimensioning is to show the size and location information for all features of a drawing. Must be clear and unambiguous. And when we talk about clear and unambiguous, that seems fairly straightforward, but you have to remember that drawings can go from simple to very, very complex very quickly. And when there's a lot of lines on the drawing, it's the graphic person's job to make sure that the reader is not confused between object lines and annotative lines that are used throughout the drawing set. Proper dimensioning techniques require the knowledge of appropriate standards. When you're working on a project or if you're working in a particular office, you're going to be doing certain style of drawing, and there are associated standards with those. Could be, like another agency that's requiring certain standards, or it could just be standard practice for your office. But in any case, the type of lines you use, the abbreviations you apply, the symbology you use is all generally specified by a standard for your discipline. This slide discusses or demonstrates the different types of lines within the context of dimension line types. Again, these are not object lines, they're all annotative, but this part right here that gives the actual dimension is referred to as the dimension line. The pieces that point towards the object, these are the extensions. And then anything that's radial or not horizontal and vertical, sometimes they have these leader lines. This is a leader. We saw a lot of really nitty-gritty details related to center marks when we were looking at center marks and gaps and no gaps and extensions. And we get back into it again with dimensions. When we get to the part where we're making the AutoCAD style, we'll be making settings for some of these particular things that we're interested in, like the extension of the extension line past the point where the dimension line is shown. These extension lines have gaps so that we don't confuse the object line with the annotation, just like with the center marks. Arrowheads, they seem sort of innocuous, but every style of annotation will have its own arrowheads. Even on this drawing, there's arrowhead type 1 here with the open tails, and there's arrowhead type 2 here with the closed arrowhead. And every style of drafting will have its own arrowheads. For me, the important thing to remember is that the arrowhead must be the appropriate size for the space that it's filling. It shouldn't overwhelm the space. It shouldn't be so small I can't see it. It's got to be something that's functional. Extension lines. So these extension lines allow you to align the dimension line where you want it next to your drawing. And so you can control the extension lines with grips in AutoCAD. Extension line is always a thin line that extends from a point on the drawing to which the dimension refers. Overly long extension lines are going to be confusing to your reader. And also a jumble of extension lines that aren't organized in a very orderly way are also going to be very difficult for your reader to discern. Arrowheads have, again, been shown on here. This piece here in AutoCAD, this is a value that is associated with this object, but you can double click on that and get a text box and then uh, hand edit that, override the association of the actual distance. We will be using associative style dimensions throughout this class. A leader line is a straight incline, thin, solid line that is usually terminated by an arrowhead used to identify radii, diameters, chamfer, or threads, things like that. And here it is being pointed out to you on the screen over here. A neat note, this is radial. So this is the extension line, and it's supposed to be associated with this round object, and so its little point is coming out radially from the center point towards the point that it's at on the edge of the circle, and it continues out radially, pointing straight towards the center mark of that circle before it gets to this little flat landing, and then there's a gap. And then this is, again, in AutoCAD, this would be a text box. And here you have, a use of a symbol. That would be on your alternate keyboard. In our case, we're using GDT font. And to get to our alternate keyboard, what do? We take the caps off, and then we can find that. Arrowheads are drawn between the extension lines if possible. If space is limited, they may be drawn on the outside. Arrowheads may be shared by adjacent dimensions. Now, when you get into AutoCAD and you have a dimension like this, you can click on it and drag it so that it looks like this. You can sort of grip edit your extensions in AutoCAD. So they kind of need to be well organized, and sometimes I just get the dimensions on there, and then later on I organize them. But a situation like this, where you have this short distance, and then you have this distance that's a little longer, and then you have this distance that's a little longer yet. This is the proper way to fan them up. Put the short one closest to the object, the next wide one, the second one up, the third wide one at the top. And then that allows you to stagger these extensions. In this case, this is an extension going down towards the center mark. This is an extension with a gap on an object line. This is an extension with a gap on an object line. So this one here didn't squeeze in, so they have the text between. So you might have to do a grip edit to get that to happen. And this one then, the wider one, is outside of the two extensions here. Same thing's happening here. The narrower one is closer to the body of the object. The wider dimension line is fanned above. And they're using uniform spacing on these. We're going to talk about this uniform spacing in a bit. Angled dimensions used to give the angle between two surfaces or features of a part. This is generally how they're placed between the two extensions, and these extensions are pretty much the same as the types of extensions we use on the horizontal and verticals, only we have it arranged like this. They have extensions. This is text, and you can double click it and edit it in AutoCAD. Leader dimensions, such as the call out on the diameter of a circle, drawn close to 45 degrees and arranged to avoid other dimensions. And so these would probably be put in last because you really have the most flexibility with these. You know, the other dimensions are really harder to control as far as where you can put them. So you have the greatest flexibility with these. And so put those in last. And this is the 45 they're talking about right here. The point of the arrow, if it were to continue, if this line were to continue straight, it would land right on the center point of the object. And so when you arrange these, they shouldn't be off at some weird angle. They should be at 45, pointing straight towards the center point, right there. Your lettering, of course, should always be legible, easy to read, uniform throughout the drawing. Uppercase letters should be used for all lettering unless a lowercase is required. Like you might be using a lowercase letter that's sort of like a symbol, like a small r, a small d. The minimum lettering height, and this would be printed in paper space, 0.1, and should be consistent throughout the drawing. And that's why we're using our styles. When we get into making the dimension style, we'll be using the text style that we already created, that CR.1, to allow consistency for lettering.